And welcome. Good morning, everybody. So I will start with a land acknowledgement, and then we'll do go around for everybody that's on the call today to introduce themselves. So we would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered this morning. I'm in Treaty 8 in Peace River, Alberta, and it is the land that for thousands of years has been the home to Indigenous people. The Indigenous people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries, and it has been cherished and protected. As the elders have instructed the youth through generations, we are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. In Alberta, we are all signatories to Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and we have a duty and honor to make visible our relationship to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. All right. So I'm gonna just go with who's on my screen, and then hopefully I don't miss anybody, and if I do, let me know. So I'm gonna begin with you, Anissa.
Hi, I was half listening. I think it was introductions, so.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Anissa Tilson. I'm the Vice President Student Affairs at Mount Royal University. Well, with this Students Association at Mount Royal University. Is there anything else you wanted me to say in my introduction?
Well, maybe just give Rachel an idea of why it is that you've joined the coalition through your food initiative.
Absolutely. Well, my role on campus is essentially to look after and advocate for student needs that are non-academic, food security and general health and well-being being one of those. And through my position, I have the opportunity to kind of connect you guys with some of the MRU administration, should that be something that is useful. And I get a lot of information that's valuable to some people as well. Like last meeting, I ended up connecting with the peer support center, our food security program person, about what I learned.
Right on. Thank you. Next, Kelsey from E4C.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with E4C. We're in Edmonton, and we're in 43 schools with the school nutrition program, and I'm one of the coordinators with E4C.
Thank you. Is that U of A?
Sorry, what?
Did you say the university?
43 schools in the Edmonton area.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard the word university. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No problem.
Taylor.
Yes, good morning, everyone. So my name is Taylor Keeley, and I'm a programs coordinator with the Breakfast Club of Canada. We operate school food programs, specifically breakfast programs all across Canada, and we have two individuals working with your coalition in Alberta, but they couldn't make it today, so I'm here on their behalf. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Grace.
Hi, I'm Grace. I'm another coordinator with the school nutrition program here at E4C. As Kelsey said, we have some programming in 43 schools, most of them elementary schools. We got morning meals and a few lunch schools as well.
Thank you. Jen, good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jen Flynn, the Executive Director of Apple Schools. Nice to meet everyone and see everyone again. We are actively supporting 93 schools in mostly Alberta, a couple schools in Northwest Territories, BC and Manitoba, and doing some expansion right now. So come September, we'll be in 102 schools with new supports in Calgary, Medicine Hat, and soon to be Ontario as well. So we're excited to connect with everybody and continue to learn and figure out how we can connect food programs to a comprehensive school health approach with supports for teachers. So good morning.
Thank you. Kelly.
Good morning, everybody. I'm also with E4C, and I manage the school nutrition program as well as a portfolio of other programs in the community. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. I've got another E4. Oh, Candace, sorry.
Hi, everybody. I'm Candace with E4C, and I'm a program coordinator working with Grace and Kelsey.
Thank you. And Danielle from AHS.
Hi, I'm Danielle Todd. I'm with Nutrition Services with Alberta Health Services, and I support our provincial population and public health team specifically in the area of child and youth, so focus on school-age children, and just here to just learn about all the different initiatives and share how, hopefully learn and share how we can support with our different initiatives and resources.
Thank you. Michelle.
Sorry, for some reason my video is not working.
Oh.
Hi folks, I'm Michelle. I'm with the Bow Valley Food Alliance, covering pretty big region, and kind of finding our niche of advocacy and policy, inspiring change and transformation, but not-for-profit organization who's just trying to bring food conversation to every table. So that's a little bit about us.
Thank you. And Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. Cynthia. I'm in Calgary. I am a board member for Alberta Food Matters, and just a person who doesn't work in the food space, but am very just interested in all sorts of food security things. So, hi.
And Cynthia is sort of our expert for, I can't think of another word, our expert in political kind of advocacy. She worked with Senate committees, and anyway, so Rachel, I'll leave your introduction with you, and I will turn off my speaker, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Rachel Engler-Stringer, and I'm coming to you from Saskatoon, which is Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. I am a professor at the University of Saskatchewan in the Department of Community Health and Epidemiology. And I have been working on school food research for about, I keep saying 7 years. I actually think it might be longer, but I keep saying 7 years. So I'll just keep saying 7 years. Before that, I was a food environments researcher primarily. So I was, I don't know if you remember, but like sort of between 10 and 15 years ago, there was quite a bit of research looking at like mapping locations of different kinds of food stores and what was available. And so that was what I did primarily. And then I kind of came to the point where I thought, I need to work in a very specific food environment where I can change the food environment, because I was getting very frustrated with just telling the story of how poor our food environments are. And so I moved into, and in large part, I would credit that to Food Secure Canada, because I was in a meeting between the Canadian Association for Food Studies and Food Secure Canada, where we basically said, tell us what you'd like to do research on, what we'd like us to do research on. So the academics said, tell us what you'd like us to do research on. And they gave a list of 3 things, and one of those was school food programs. And so I decided, okay, well, this fits with what I already do, and I'm going to switch gears and I'm going to work on school food programs. So I've been doing that for a number of years. There's been a number of studies, but the study I'm here to speak to you about right now is a population health intervention research study. So what that means is that changing something about a particular context in the real world, and with the intention to figure out what happens and if there are changes in anything related to health, so health indicators of various sorts. And so what we decided to do, so this was like there probably been 3 or 4 studies before this, but we felt like we're at the point where we could intervene in a school food environment, change things, and determine what happens. And so the intervention was a universal curriculum integrated school lunch program in 2 schools, comparing them to 2 control schools. So for those of you, I don't expect everyone to have a background in science and research, but just to explain it sort of simply, nothing like this had ever been done before, and it's really hard to do. We very rarely do research where we actually compare one context to a context that hasn't had an intervention, and see what the differences are between those 2. in the real world. We do it with like clinical trials, with new medications, those sorts of things, or with new interventions in medicine. But we don't usually do this in the real world. It's hard because it's hard to do. There's a lot of complexity to it. So, but we decided we were going to do this, and it took us 4 tries to get funding. It took us 2 years to get funding for it from the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. And so what we did is right before COVID, we finally got the funding, and we were going to hit the ground running. And then of course, COVID, and so schools closed. And so we put it off by a year. So in May and June of 2021, so if I don't know how you remember this, but it was during one of the worst waves of COVID, we went and collected our baseline data in our 2 intervention and our 2 control schools. And we then rolled out this intervention, this universal curriculum integrated school lunch program over 2 school years, and it just finished. And so we collected our endpoint data in May and June of this year. And then we did case studies of the 2 intervention schools throughout the entire 2-year period. So that's what the research is. The data that I have to share at this point really is just baseline data, because we've only analyzed the baseline data so far, right? We've just finished collecting the endpoint data. And then also some of the case studies. And then, so just to give you a bit of context as to where we're at right now, so funding for this, so that funding came primarily from the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. We also got, pardon me, some funding. We've had smoke in the last 2 days in Saskatoon again, and so I have asthma, so my lungs are not great at the moment. And then some of the food costs, additional food costs of moving to universal programs, we got an anonymous donor who provided some funding for those food costs. And then the rest of the additional funding through what was already being spent pre this project from Saskatoon Public Schools. So that was kind of how the project was funded. Now what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how to continue and grow. And so we put in a letter of intent to the Public Health Agency of Canada in the winter. That was accepted. We were invited to a full proposal. The full proposal went in at the end of June. We should theoretically find out sometime in August or September, probably in September, if we get the funding. And that is to scale up from 2 intervention schools to 4 intervention schools to 8 intervention schools to 10 intervention schools. So over a period of 4 years. So doing it and a movement, a shift from cooking the entire meal at the school level to centralizing the main dish preparation in order to save in costs and save in labor. Like there's a number of things. Especially in a city context, one of the things we've learned is that you can prepare food in larger quantity, so for a larger number of schools at a reduced cost, but still have some of that work happening at the school level. So the plan with this is that the main dish will be centralized and delivered to the schools, and they'll reheat it. So they'll be prepared the night before and then reheated in the morning. But at the school level, they'll still be preparing any breakfasts they're serving, any snacks they're serving, and they'll be chopping all vegetables and fruit and all the side dishes, basically. And the advantage of this is that there's no need for significant increases in terms of infrastructure at the school level. So these are all schools that currently have small kitchens. And really the only change will be that they have the ability to heat up big trays of food for the main dish, or for whatever, or big pots of soup, or whatever the main dish happens to be. So that's really the only infrastructure change that needs to happen. And we're in the midst, there's a new school being built. And so part of this is the new school is amalgamating 3 of the inner city schools in Saskatoon into one school. And the plan is to have that centralized kitchen. So initially we've got a different plan, but at the partway through the project, this new centralized kitchen will be complete in this brand new school. And the plan is to, assuming everything works out, is to have that school preparing lunches, the main dish, for lunches for up to 10 schools, and actually potentially even beyond that into the future. So, you know, basically a state-of-the-art commercial kitchen is really that's what they will produce. So we've learned a ton throughout this process. I mean, all sorts of things, like, so for example, I met with one of the schools. So because the intervention ended at the end of June, we won't know if we have funding for September. They're going back to their previous program for September with the plan that if the funding comes through, they'll go back to the universal come January. So there'd be a 4-month gap. And it's been super interesting. We went and met and went through, I mean, we're in the schools all the time, but we went and did like a full rundown of all the data we have to date and everything we've learned, and we shared it back with them, everything from costing, because we've done detailed costing of what has happened, like the universal lunches. We've done all these things, and so we shared all this data that we had so far. And one of the things that we heard, and we heard it actually from both schools, is that they're quite convinced that going back to their previous program, so prior to the intervention, they mostly served sandwiches. So it was a sort of like 25 to 40% of the kids in the schools who they served to, and it was mostly sandwiches. And they actually think that going back to the previous program in the fall is going to be more expensive than what we were running with them, because sandwiches are actually really expensive to produce and put together. And because they've gotten so efficient at making these, like, you know, like casseroles and, you know, various pasta dishes and soups and all this, they've gotten so efficient over time. And in fact, we saw this in the data. They got it, like the meals got less and less expensive as time went on, even despite food inflation. This is sort of the really fascinating to see. They're actually convinced that going back to their previous program is going to end up costing them more. So it's really interesting to see how things have kind of played out. But of course, I mean, that's factoring in the fact that they now have good quality kitchens in their schools. Like, part of the project was to upgrade their kitchens to have commercial scale, commercial dishwashers, like all of those kinds of things. So they have those in their schools now. And so basically what they're saying is they don't think it actually would cost more to continue doing what they were doing, maybe not feed everybody in the school, but prepare hot meals and so on. For all the kids. So anyway, we'll see what happens in the fall. So that's just one of the projects that I'm working on. And I know I'm not here to speak about the others, but just very, very briefly, we got funding last year to do case studies of promising school food programs in every province and territory. So we are about 2/3 of the way through that project. We end up collecting data way faster than we were originally intending. So we've got these really interesting case studies of every province and territory. We're also doing some historical work. My friend and colleague Ian Mosby at Toronto Metropolitan University, who's a food historian, he's one of the only experts in this country who actually knows like what has happened, why school food is the way it is. And so he's in the archives with the students, looking at how we've ended up where we have, because Canada's such an exception, right? The vast majority of countries like Canada look completely different when it comes to the school food landscape. They have some sort of school food program that's, if not fully national, it's national in some way. So he's doing that as well. And then the third big project that we are working on, that we're about a little over halfway done, is a school food development project funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada with the Meadow Lake Tribal Council. So Meadow Lake Tribal Council is 9 First Nations in northwestern Saskatchewan. So Treaty 6, Treaty 8, Treaty 10 territory, just geographically speaking. And then also 3 schools in Saskatoon that have large Indigenous populations, helping them, basically supporting them to create their own school food programs that are culturally appropriate. So that's the third big project that we have going on right now. So I'm doing a ton of different kinds of school food research, and it sounds like I'm doing a lot, but the reality is I have lots of staff and students who are doing the bulk of the work. And so I don't like to take too much credit for it, because frankly, other people, I'm the one who gets the grants, but most of the day-to-day work is done by other people. So yeah, I mean, that's it. That's where we're at. If you have questions, or if there's anything that we might have produced as far as resources or tools or whatever that you'd be interested in having, we'd be happy to share them with you. I mean, I see this as like building towards the future and looking at trying to get to a place where our kids, have healthy meals at school and all of the sort of well-being that comes with that. So I share anything that anybody would want to see in terms of tools or anything that we've learned or whatever. I'm always happy to share those things. Yeah, and I'm in Alberta actually fairly frequently. My father-in-law is in Calgary and he has dementia, and he lost his wife almost exactly a year ago. And so he needs a lot of care, and we still haven't quite convinced him to move to Saskatoon. So I'm often in Calgary, helping to figure out his care. So I'm in Alberta fairly frequently. I'm not in Edmonton quite as often, but I'm in Calgary quite frequently. So yeah.
So I wonder if you could share your email in the chat and let people have a chance to connect with you.
I'll put it in the chat, and then I'll also say given how unusual my name is, all you need to do is Google me and you'll get to my webpage and you'll find it. And actually, if you want, you can, I also have a YouTube channel that's got interesting videos on it. And I actually think probably all of you would be interested in those. So I was supposed to go and see some of the best school food programs in the world during my 2021 sabbatical. And you can imagine I did not do that because there was no travel happening in 2021. And so instead, what I ended up doing was commissioning filmmakers in Finland, France, and Japan to make short videos of their school lunch programs in those 3 countries. And really just to highlight their characteristics and to show, really for a Canadian audience to be able to see what it looks like, what school lunch looks like in those countries. So if you just put my name in YouTube, you'll come to that as well. So there's 3 videos there. We found that they've been quite, people really like them because they're very practically focused on sort of how their programs operate. So yeah, you can also just Google my name and you'll come to my University of Saskatchewan webpage as well. So you can also do that. But I did just put my email address in the chat.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess questions is where.
I'm looking to see. Okay, I see no questions in the chat. But I think, seeing as you shared your email, I think that, and the YouTube resources, that's good. I did watch those videos that you guys had done, and they are really a good snapshot of and ideas for what we can do here for sure. So your team, are you also working with Amberly?
So Amberly is my postdoctoral fellow. Yes. So Amberly is part of the team. So she began working with me as a postdoctoral fellow in, I think, January of last year. So January 2022. Yes. So she's part of that team. There's PhD students, there's master's students, and then there's staff. So we have one full-time staff person based out of Middle Lake, working with Middle Lake Tribal Council schools. We have one full-time staff person here in Saskatoon working with Saskatoon public schools. I mean, this is the advantage of having good funding, and we've been very we were very successful. We had, I call it luck because frankly, like granting it's so competitive these days and the success rates are so low that, sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not, you end up in that top group. And so we just happen to have gotten quite a bit of funding in a short time period. And so I have a lot of staff right now. I have 3 half-time staff, 2 full-time staff, plus Amberly, plus a whole bunch of students working with me. Hence why I'm madly filling out grant applications because I really want them to keep working because they're so amazing. Like the people who are working with me right now are so good at what they do. You know, we have a teacher, we have like just people with really interesting backgrounds that make them particularly well suited to working in the area of school food.
Yeah. Well, I just asked Anissa to like connect, see if Alberta's got some people like you working in school foods in Alberta, because Kim Rain has retired. So
yeah. Oh, I've
so
known
now,
she was my external examiner for my PhD. So for those of you who don't know what that means, so when you do a PhD, somebody from another institution has to review your thesis and decide whether it's sufficient to be a PhD. She was my external examiner. I have known Kim for a very, very long time.
well,
yeah, and she was such a huge resource in Alberta. I mean, she really was someone who, yeah, we did a writing retreat together a few years ago, and I remember her telling me she was getting near retirement. I didn't quite believe what would happen, but
here we are. Yeah. Anyway, so we really need somebody like Kim back in U of A or U of C or somewhere so that we can undertake to keep the ball moving in Alberta. Anyway, but I shouldn't take much more of your time. You sound you got lots on your plate. Anyway,
I did want to ask a question, if that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, I am Anissa. I was wondering if you had any information resources that was more catered to post-secondary schools, because food security in those areas is really important too, but food programs are going to probably look a lot different.
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't been working in that area for a while. A number of years ago, one of my master's students did her thesis work on food insecurity among University of Saskatchewan students. So there was a period of time where after those results came out, and we published a paper on it. So if you put my name in and do student food insecurity, you'll find the paper. After that paper came out, for a while, I was quite frequently in meetings, especially with student groups, both undergrad and grad students, you know, as they were trying to think through what to do on campuses. I mean, it's complicated, right? In that, you know, I would argue that school food programs they're a bit of a strange combination of what it is that they do, in that I mean, I see them primarily as about well-being and health promotion, more than I see them as addressing food insecurity, in part because it's, you know, one meal a day. Sometimes it's more than that. And maybe it does have an impact on child food insecurity, like at the individual child level. But in terms of actually, you know, moving the needle on household food insecurity, I'm not convinced that school food programs can fully do that. I'm not discounting their impacts on children as individuals by any stretch, but you know, in the bigger picture, I think, you know, we need you know, changes to income. We need that. Like, income is really what, like, and in the student context, I mean, you know, the way that I always frame it is, we need to deal with constant rising tuition costs, and we need to deal with things like the cost of student housing, for example, which is also constantly rising. So I think the primary solutions when it comes to this university context is we need to make it less expensive to go to university, which is very much like, that's how we deal with the inequities that are starting to reappear. You know, for such a long time, like my parents, like my grandparents had, at least on my father's side, had, you know, grade 8 education, grade 6, grade 8 education. I do not come from an affluent background at all, especially on my father's side. And yet my father and most of his siblings were able to go to post-secondary, because post-secondary was so inexpensive in that time period, in the 1960s and 1970s. And they had no debt. They had, like, they finished university, you know, basically being able to, in one generation, change the lives and their affluence, and you know, own a home and all those kinds of things. And that is just been deteriorating so dramatically, and it's been picking up steam, the deterioration, in the last 20 years. So, I mean, I see this as like an access to education, but and that's where the parallel is, right? In terms of elementary and secondary school, in that I think that public schooling is one of the biggest things we can do as a society to level the playing field. Like there are very few things we can do as a society that have as great an impact on equity as really good comprehensive public education. And that follows, right, all the way from elementary school up through post-secondary. So like I really see this as like an education advocacy, is ensuring that our schools are able, and I know you in Alberta are in exactly the same boat as we are in Saskatchewan in terms of the erosion of funding to public education, and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And yeah, anyway, it's a whole, but that's, I mean, I do see these things as being all connected. And yeah, a long-winded answer to it. So don't get me started about public education.
But like, was there like, I don't know, somebody that you would recommend reaching out to?
Well, I mean, there are a few people. I mean, it's certainly, if you have an interest in, if you have a specific interest in food insecurity in post-secondary students, send me an email and I can send you a few papers. There's also been a paper just published that is got a very different perspective than the ones that have been done to date. And this was produced by Val Terasuk's team, and kind of comparing people at the same age who are in post-secondary or not in post-secondary, and looking at food insecurity rates. And actually what they found was higher food insecurity amongst those not in post-secondary. And so, I mean, not to discount that post-secondary students are struggling for sure, but also to say that what the bigger picture problem is a problem of food insecurity among young people. And that is both, you know, it's precarity, it's doing jobs that are really poorly paid, in really high cost of living, all of those things. And so it's actually impacting young adults very, very seriously in a way that probably there isn't a history of that in at least not in the last number of decades. And so I think there's some things we need to start thinking about there that we haven't up until now. So I can send you those papers, certainly, and I'm happy to do that.
Awesome, thank you.
You know, I also think that this the school food situation right now is very impactful on women, because we have moved out of the 50s where moms could manage feeding their children, preparing lunches, to a generation that we're all working, and we're still expected in Canada to pick up the torch and run with it, like just be everything for everybody. And I see a lot of young women who are just guilt-ridden because of the crap that they send to school with their kids, because it's easier. And I think as a society, we've kind of dropped the ball on families, because why couldn't we provide food for our children and let women off the hook, that they know their kids are in school and they're getting a good, healthy meal? Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, that's what parents tell us, and primarily mothers, because they're the ones who answer the surveys or who participate in the focus group, right? And that's what they tell us is how much of a relief it is to know that you've got this is taken care of without having to, without having that kind of struggle that exists. So we certainly got data to that effect. I totally agree with you. I see school food programs as being feminist programs. Like I really truly think, I mean, and it's interesting because that's also across the socioeconomic spectrum. You have the same, so you know, the context in which I am generally in, I sort of say this a little bit flippantly, but I actually, it's true. I have a daughter who plays high-level soccer, and the world of soccer, especially high-level soccer, is a very privileged environment. It's not as an expensive sport as hockey, but it's still very expensive. And in those environments, I sometimes get asked what I do, and I will, tell the other parents, mostly mothers, what it is I do. And they are also like, oh, can you imagine not having, I would be happy to pay for it if my kid had a lunch, a healthy meal at school that they were eating with all the other kids. So it's kind of it's so fascinating that it does kind of go across the socioeconomic spectrum. The reasons for it might be a little bit different depending on, but time crunch is pretty universal at this point, at this point in time. And historically, so bringing it back to the history, so Food Will Win the War was the book that Ian Mosby published on, that was his dissertation, PhD dissertation. And it's really fun read if anyone ever wants to read it. It's
Say that title again.
Called Food Will Win the War. And it's a history of food during the Second World War. So that's what he did his PhD dissertation on. And there's a chapter in it on school food. And that's why he and I started working together, was because this one chapter on school food, there was this huge momentum towards a universal national school food program in Canada during the Second World War. It was like, there was articles in Chatelaine magazine, and the Red Cross was taking this on as their one of their big campaigns. It was huge. And then what happened is, in the aftermath of the Second World War, when almost all comparator countries established their national school food programs, what Canada did was decide to put in family allowance. And the decision with family allowance was that that was already really expensive, and they couldn't do more. And that with a family allowance, and there's quotes in it from the Prime Minister, for the Minister of Finance at that time. So in the book, there's all these really fascinating quotes, basically saying, well, now we've given mothers enough money, and they should be able to feed their kids, and their kids should go home for lunch. So the assumption in Canada was that children would go home for lunch, and their mothers and their mothers would prepare a meal for them. And frankly, we are continuing to live with that legacy. And there was a book published looking at food policy, school food policy around the world. And that book, I'm trying to remember who was the lead on that. Anyway, I can't think of it right now. Rutledge was her last name. And she uncovered this as well, similar to what Ian found in his examining of the historical record, was that social policy in Canada was in the post-Second World War period through for about 35 years was very heavily focused on keeping women in the home. And that was the way our federal government looked at the world, was we want women to go back, because they had left the home and they were working during the war. They wanted women to go home and stay home. And so social policy in Canada was very, in comparison to other countries, because it's very different from lots of other countries, it was very focused in Canada on ways to keep women at home. And I think we're living with that legacy today, despite the fact that we lost the family allowance. I mean, I think I was 12 when family allowance, or 12 or 13. It was early 90s when family allowance was cut. I remember my mother getting the check when I was little, but I certainly remember it stopping at some point when I was a teenager. So there's no longer there's no real argument to not have it now, especially when almost everybody else is doing has some sort of national program. So I mean, again, I would agree with you. There's a very, it's hard. I think the hard part is articulating it, but I think explaining that school food programs are feminist programs. They are very much about making the lives of women easier, because we still have the vast majority of food work being done by women. And then in addition to that, it's providing good jobs for women as well. If school food people working in school food programs are paid a living wage, because those workers are primarily women. They're mostly newcomer women in Canada. They're, here in Saskatoon, it's usually someone who's a mother of a kid at the school who gets hired to prepare food. They're paid horribly right now. I mean, we're talking barely above minimum wage. At least here in Saskatchewan. And if you pay them in a way that if it's living wage, if it's good jobs where there's training, where there's all these things that make good jobs, it also is a feminist program in terms of creating good jobs that women want to do that also fit with the school day, because there are lots and lots of mothers who want jobs that actually fit within the school day. And so, I mean, there's so much that could be done with school food that could really be very beneficial to the lives of women in particular. So again, long answer to a question. So it's why you can't ask me questions.
All right, no more questions. No, I invite everybody, if you have any other questions. It has been really informative. Thank you, Rachel. Amazing.
You're very welcome. And I'm happy to answer questions via email as well. So
right.
I always do my best to help wherever I can with, across the country. And I mean, one of the advantages, of course, of Alberta is that you're geographically close, and also politically, we have very similar political situations in our provinces. So I think there's also some parallels, although if you look at funding for school food, it's better in Alberta than it is in Saskatchewan, sadly.
Even per capita? Because I thought.
Well, as far as I can tell, based upon the numbers that Gord has from the funding that they get, and knowing that what percentage of the funding that they get, I think it actually is worse in Saskatchewan. Yes.
Dang. Yeah. Because that was a question I was going to ask Kelly. We had got a bump up of 20% food insecurity or some kind of, or the cost of food. There was a bump up.
So funding in Alberta flows through Alberta Education to the school divisions. And so the school divisions were given an increase, but we still are awaiting clarification from Minister if that's to cover the increased cost of food, if that's to reincorporate the pilot schools that were delivered under a different funding umbrella into the regular fold. So we're still waiting on clarification, but yeah, so there was a 20% increase. For what? Question marks. Dear Dominic will have to elaborate for us later when they're back from the stampede. I don't think we'll get an answer before then.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're too busy flipping pancakes right now, I think. So we'll wait to find out.
So I wonder, Kelly, was that in budget 2023, or was that just kind of outside of the budget? That was just some money that was.
So this is part of the annual allocation to the budgets for each school division that flows through Alberta Education, is my understanding. It's part of the monies that were released through committee.
Anyway, Rachel and I are in touch through the coalition, and I would just like to reiterate again, thank you so much, Rachel, for a very informative presentation, and thank you for letting us get a hold of you whenever. It would be great. And I'll let you get back to your busy life.
Yes, particularly busy this week. My father-in-law is flying in from Calgary today. He's staying with us for the next few days, and we're packing for our trip. And yeah, no, it's a bit of a gong show of a few days right now. So I'm always happy to help, but today I need to run, but feel free to ask me specific questions, or if there's anything you'd like me to do in the future. I'm quite happy to do that. So
wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Okay, take care. So I would like to just, speaking of the coalition, I'd just like to say in the minutes, I see there's a few people on there, or sorry, in the agenda. I just copied and pasted from the coalition. They had a federal advocacy, a couple of things there, an impact sheet and an infographic, because Kelly, I'm not sure if you guys were ever successful to get Randy Boissonneau to, I thought he had come to visit a school, or if you were just trying to connect with him. I'm not sure what the status of that is.
I know their desire is to have Minister Boissonneau come, or Associate Minister Boissonneau to come and visit a school. I don't believe so. I think it was Jen that was hoping. I don't know. Through
Okay.
Apple schools, that was the ask of ourselves and of the Apple school. So I don't think that the visit has happened yet, but they're just back into the constituency. And again, I wouldn't expect any kind of engagement until after Stampede. I know that sounds trite, but the Stampede is one of the largest political and business mingling events in Alberta. And so no elected official or member of the business community is usually available for any kind of engagement until after the Stampede is done.
Well,
I was going to say the same thing. I was like, I believe Randy's at Stampede like every other elected official right now and business person. So you and I are on the same page on that front as well. I see them all in their cowboy hats and belt buckles and plaid shirts, flipping many pancakes for the next, I think it's through the next week still. So
unbelievable. Wow. Well, Jen, maybe your schools in Calgary would be a target for, wouldn't that be a field? Although the kids aren't in school, why would they go there? Yeah. Anyway, so just some infographic and talking points in case you're interested. And then because we had Rachel, I thought it would be of interest of different provincial, different school food activities in other provinces. BC really, when we talk about funding, holy cow, they just got a landslide of funding. So something to look to there. Although I will say Quebec also does very, very well, even though I don't know why we don't pay more attention to what's going on there. They have some pretty phenomenal stuff going on there. And Newfoundland, that there's a talk show interview and an article on school food to look at. I think Jen and Kelly that Debbie is still working pretty hard trying to get Randy. So I don't know. That woman is a very determined person. And so maybe things will start unclenching there. So I'm wondering, the group that's here today, the school food collection of data, is that something that is really of interest to this group? What if we could find a way to streamline data collection, find a central repository for it so that you guys could go in and see what data is coming out of other programs? Like, it would be interesting to see the data from Breakfast Club, from Apple Schools, from E4C, from Backpacks for Calgary Kids, to have a central repository so that we could all see them. Or does anybody think that's really necessary or helpful, I guess? Well, I'll leave that with you guys. I am trying to get somebody from U of A who did initially start funding, or sorry, doing data collection with you, right, Jen? U of A was kind of pivotal to what you guys started with.
Yeah, all of our principal investigators, all of our researchers through the U of A School of Public Health and the University of Toronto, but the university is huge. There's a number of really great researchers doing work, like you mentioned. Kim Rain was doing tons of work on school food environments, and we got the email back that her and her team have developed an app to do some data collection on that front. The researchers that we work with to measure health behaviors in schools is a little bit different. They're kind of measuring similar to what Rachel was talking about, kind of a population level study. They do data collection on health behaviors in school intervention sites. Yeah, I think there's lots of cool things happening in that world of food program measurement and food environment measurement, but I'm not sure if anybody around the table is working with any researchers specifically on that. I know that our team that we work with is looking at kind of comprehensive school health and intervention. So I'm not sure that it says pertinent right now, but I can reach out to them and see if there's anyone that they could suggest.
If you would, that would be
And you
super.
reached out to Kim to, she has a postdoc, Alexa, I think her name is. She's doing some of the works. Perhaps she'd be a good person to reach out to say, hey, could you give us an update on the app? I'm not sure if people around the table are familiar with that work. That was around the
Beautiful.
school
Yep.
nutrition report card, and they've switched it into an app and are seeing if that could be beneficial and functional for schools to collect environments. I know they're working with the Minister of Education on that, the previous minister as well. So I don't know, Wanda, if they responded to you on that front, or again, or if anybody around the table works with them on that front. It's not connected directly to Apple. I just know about it.
Okay. Nope, that's a very good link there. I'll pursue that. Thank you. All right. So our next meeting, August 14th. Now I'm putting up that it's APCCP. They are looking to get a sort of an executive director, and I'll just see if I can get them. I might also get Rethink Red Deer to come and talk to us, and maybe because Renee is starting up a composting initiative at the community garden in Red Deer, and is looking to involve schools. And so I just thought people might be interested in that initiative. Anyway, and if anybody has some other group that you have vaguely heard of and you would like to have them present to us, just fire me off an email to admin@Alberta Food Matters, and I will try and set that up. And I see that Shelby just came on, and so Chantel Bradley, I've recorded this presentation, and I will send off the recording as soon as it's ready, so you can hear anything that you might have missed going on. Alrighty, gals and guy. I hope you continue to have a good summer. Safe travels. And we'll talk to you, whoever comes on in August. Take care.